Hey, welcome back to the Inspire Hope podcast, where we are planting hope for kingdom growth. There is nothing more inspiring than God being at work in people's lives through their stories. We are Samuel and Rachel, and we are the hosts of this podcast.
Hello, everyone. This week we are having a special episode as it is Remembrance Day here in Canada. Other people call it Veterans Day in the States, and it's observed by many countries around the world as it was the end of World War I.
I remember when I just moved to Canada and November 11th, I would see people wearing that little, I would call, at that time, I didn't know what it was. It was a little red flower. Now I know it's the red poppy. I didn't know really the significance of it. But for you as a Canadian, when you see somebody else wearing that red poppy, what comes to mind?
I've been fascinated by Remembrance Day, by the poppy. I've had close relationships with soldiers in Canada and in the States. And neither one of my grandfathers served. I don't even know if my great-grandfather did. We had relatives that did, but it has always been a very important day to me. There was a time where I dated a soldier for 3 years in the States and saw him through Iraq and Afghanistan. As I grew up, the poppy always symbolized my freedom in this country, that I'm able to freely go to church and worship my God. I am able to not fear walking out of my house every day, or as a woman, like being affected in certain ways because of what these soldiers have done for our country. And then as I dated this soldier, it became that much more real to me because I saw the cost of what war does to people. There were a few soldiers who died in the middle of the war that were part of the battalion. There were other men that I saw with extreme PTSD. And so I saw not only the soldiers, but the cost that the families had as well in that time. So when I see Remembrance Day coming, I don't just think of World War I as much as that shaped part of our country and it was huge. I also look at present day soldiers and their families and what this day represents, the lives that have been lost, the funerals and the sacrifices and the grief of those families, and the remembrance of the honor of their lives as well as the sacrifice of them.
Even for me as a foreigner who comes to this country, and to be able to come to this country to live and experience the freedom that is in this country, where I can walk out and I can go on the sidewalk and I'm not afraid that somebody gonna come and another country just gonna come and attack us, which is still, there's a possibility, but I know there are brave men and women who are there to protect us, and that's what happened many years ago, and that is still happening today. As I remember a couple years ago, as I was preparing to become a Canadian citizen, which I am so excited now. I can wear the red poppy like every other Canadian, and wearing it proudly. But I needed to read, for the exam. I needed to read Discovery Canada, and part of it about the Remembrance Day I'm gonna read for you is this: Canadians remember the sacrifices of our veterans and brave fallen in all wars up to the present day in which Canadians took part. Each year on November 11th, Remembrance Day, Canadians wear the red poppy and observe a moment of silence at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month to honor the sacrifices of over 1 million brave men and women who have served, and the 110,000 who have given their lives. Canadian Medical Officer Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae composed the poem in Flanders Fields in 1915. It is often recited on Remembrance Day.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from flailing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
This is a beautiful poem. I was reading some stories about it, and there was a pastor who, on a sermon, says something like this. The first Remembrance Day was observed on November 11th, 1931. Every year on November 11th, Canadians pause in a moment of silence. So he was just explaining that, and he get to the point of talking about how we gain our freedom because of what these men and women did. And just to think about how many of them lost their lives. About 100,010 soldiers who died so that we, you and me, Rachel, and others can live in this beautiful country called Canada at peace. This means a lot. To gain our freedom bring a lot of pain and sufferings. And families who, as you were saying earlier, who are still remembers. For me, Remembrance Day, we honor those sacrifices. But I didn't have a close relative or a friend who died like that. But there are people, families who have or had loved ones who went to war and died and suffered. And every Remembrance Day, they that's what they are thinking about: how they gained their freedom, but also how they lost someone they love.
I think at times that war almost gets glorified in the sense that, kids are growing up playing Call of Duty and games like that where it seems almost fun. It seems that, yeah, okay, let's get in there, rah, rah, let's like kill the bad guys, quoted. But the reality is so much different when you're standing face to face with the enemy and your life is on the line. It's a very, very different way. When you get a taste of that reality, whether a soldier yourself or whether the family of that soldier, when you don't hear from them for a week or a few weeks and you wonder if they're alive or not, and you're following the news and listening to reports, then the reality is in your face. It's awful. And I know you coming from Haiti can understand a bit more of warfare and what that does. And so I think bringing reality to that is hard, but it's also needed to keep that in the forefront, that this isn't something, guys just marched off, did their thing, and some of them came home and some of them didn't. They go for so much more. It's not just a job to them. This is to bring that freedom. This is to honor the country that they've grown up in, to keep what they started in this place. I think sometimes the further we move away from war, the less we remember all of that. And so I think that's why we have marked days and marked symbols like this, like the poppy, to draw us back to where are we coming from and why are we able to do what we do today because of that.
Yeah, so that we can remember, right? It's human being, like we forget easily, but every time we don't. I wish we're not only remembering them in one day, but throughout our lives, as we are walking, as we are going to work, as we are going to church, or whatever activities we are doing, we are thinking of, like, somebody died so that I can have that freedom. Somebody died so that there is not another country that comes and occupied us. Somebody died. As I mentioned earlier, this pastor was talking about the Remembrance Day, how we Canadian proudly wear that red poppy to remind us of that sacrifice the soldiers made. And he also pointed out that we as believers, people who believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, we also have a symbol. Our symbol is the cross. When you hear the word cross, you hear death. The same way the soldiers died so that we can have freedom today, there is not in the same way, but somebody died so that we believers can have the ultimate freedom that Christ can bring. And as I was reading that sermon, I was like, wow, this is powerful that we also have a symbol. We don't only wear that symbol every Sunday when we go to church, but we have that symbol in us, knowing that Christ died so that we can have the ultimate freedom.
As I was thinking about this episode this morning and just praying about what to talk about, the phrase freedom always comes from sacrifice came to mind, because I was like, is that true that it always comes from sacrifice? And thinking about these soldiers led me to thinking about Christ, and that it was ultimately by Jesus' sacrifice that we have the freedom that we have. And so yes, there's always a price to pay to be free. But I think because of that, freedom is so much more profound, and we're so much more grateful for it because we realize that there is a price. But then freedom brings peace, because without freedom, there is war. Without freedom, there is fear of what might come. But because we have freedom, we can then find peace. Sometimes I like to match John 14:27 with John 16:33. And John 14:27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." And then John 16:33 says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. I have conquered the world." So again, through Christ's freedom, we then have peace, that even though there's still things going on in the world, like there is today, there's still suffering, there's still things that we go through, ultimately we have freedom because Christ gave it to us.
As I hear you talking about the word freedom and peace, in the New Testament, in Paul's salutation, he will start with shalom. And even at the end, he will kind of like, shalom, peace I live with you. Like Christ would say, like, peace I live with you. And when we hear the word peace, I don't think we truly understand the true meaning of peace. We experience peace in Canada, but I don't think we exactly know. Like in the Bible, when we hear the word peace, it means like everything is as it's supposed to be. Everything is well, everything is shalom, everything is at peace. So there is no more war, no more running for your life, no more fear that the enemy is coming to put you into slavery. There is none of that. You're at peace, either spiritually or physically. And that's the peace that Christ is talking about, right? When he says, my peace I live with you, I live my shalom with you. Not the same way the world give peace. You can live in the freedom that you don't need to live in fear that another country or the enemy will keep attacking you. But hey, you have me, you have my peace. So inside of you, you need to know that you have Christ peace living in you. So that peace, the world, in this world, you will have trouble. Yeah, we can see it happening in the world right now. There is war everywhere, and you kind of wonder, where is that peace that Christ offered us? It is right inside of you, that we don't need to be afraid. We need to know that Christ lives in us and we have that shalom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good. I was reading this morning. I love how God just links things together when you're focused on something, that everything just seems to line up with that. So my devotions this morning was in Psalm 46, and I wanted to read it because I think it's so fitting to what we're talking about. It says, "God is our refuge and strength, a helper who is always found in times of trouble. Therefore we will not be afraid, though the earth trembles and the mountains topple into the depths of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with its turmoil. There is a river, its streams delight the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is within her, she will not be toppled. God will help her when the morning dawns. Nations rage, kingdoms topple. The earth melts when he lifts his voice. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Come, see the work of the Lord, who brings devastation on the earth. He makes wars cease throughout the earth. He shatters bows and cuts spears to pieces. He burns up the chariots. Stop your fighting and know that I am God, exalted among the nations, exalted on the earth. Yahweh of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold." I just like that talks about sovereign, all powerful God that we serve, that he knows, though the enemy may advance, he's 100 steps beyond him, that he already knows every move that that enemy is going to make, and he knows how to thwart it. And then the fact that he is the Lord of hosts, that means the commander of the heavenly hosts, the army of Israel, that he is above all and knows all and is fighting for his people. Connecting that to Remembrance Day, as I'm thinking about these soldiers and their families, and as we honor all of them, that as they go to the cenotaphs, as they go to the cemeteries and reflect on these things, that there is a greater hope and a greater peace that can be found. Because just as these men sacrificed for their country, Jesus sacrificed for the world. He has won the victory, and he will win the victory, and that war will eventually completely cease. We can turn to him and find our hope in these desperate situations, knowing that he has it all in his hands and in his control.
I'm hearing you and I'm thinking of John chapter 15, verse 13. Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And that's exactly what the soldiers did. They lay down their lives so that we can have that freedom. But Christ laid down his life, which he didn't have to reconcile us with God. He offered the ultimate sacrifice once and for all, so that we can be united with God again, so that we can be one in the family of God again, that so that anybody who called on Jesus' name can be part of this family again. And he said, this is why I'm giving my life. That's the kind of love I have. No greater love can surpass that. The love that I choose to lay my life down for you guys. He didn't need to, but I'm so glad. I heard a pastor said once that you will hear people say, well, it was supposed to be me on the cross because it was my sin. And he said, well, I'm so glad it wasn't you, because if it was you, it would mean nothing. I'm glad that it was Christ, because his death brings us the ultimate freedom that only him, only his death can bring. As we're talking about families who suffered and who every time Remembrance Day comes, they remember their loved one. You know, Mary, Jesus' mother, and the disciples, that Friday night, that Saturday morning, man, it was tough for them. You know, even when you read the gospel, how Mary was just like, that's her son. Just think of a mother is is looking at her son dying and cannot do anything, cannot rescue him. But Jesus didn't need anybody to rescue him, because he could have done it himself if he wanted to. But that's the purpose why he came, to glorify God through his death. But as a mother, she's looking at him, crying, and knowing that there is nothing I can do to rescue my son. As you were saying earlier, freedom, there's a cost. It cost somebody their lives, and it cost Jesus' life on the cross, so that you and me, Rachel, we can have that love, that freedom that Christ brings, that peace that only him can give us.
And I love that you say that, because as I'm picturing Mary and the disciples grieving his loss, then they were able to turn around and run with hope, because they knew what Jesus did, that he came back and that he forged the way. And just the same we can do as well in our grief and our despair, in these families who have lost dear loved ones, that they can still run with hope. They can honor those family members that have died or that have been greatly altered because of the wars, and then they can run with hope, knowing that there is a God who loves them and is seeing their pain and is walking with them through that.
You know, there is that famous line in the psalm that's in the sermon that says, "It's Friday, but Sunday's coming." We know Christ sacrifice, his death and burial, on Friday. The disciple didn't know that Sunday was going to be different for them. They didn't know that they were going to experience a different freedom. It's Friday, but Sunday is coming. The glorious day is coming when Christ, after his burial and resurrection, once and for all, gave us the freedom, the only freedom that he can bring. And now the disciples who were cowardly hiding themselves in their house because they were afraid of the Jews, now they're walking out and telling people about Jesus Christ, the Messiah, whom you killed. Okay, they were afraid, and now they are coming out and pointing finger and say, "You killed the Messiah." But that's the reason why he came, so that he can lay down his life for his people. It's just so beautiful that we have a freedom, but it cost somebody something, cost somebody their life, so that we can experience that freedom today.
Amen. Matthew 5, verse 4 says, "Those who mourn are blessed, for they will be comforted." So as we close today, I just want to remind everybody to turn to Jesus in this day, in this time of remembrance, to thank him for the freedom that we have in this country, to thank him for the comfort that we can turn to as soldiers and as families, and in those difficult times, to remember that he is our comfort, he is our peace, and he is our hope. Thank you all for joining us at Inspire Hope. If this podcast has inspired and added value to you, would you mind leaving a review and recommending the podcast to your friends and family? It would mean a lot to us. Would you like to share your story with us? Email us at inspirehopepodcast@gmail.com. Have a great day, everyone, and remember, your story can inspire someone today as well. Till next time.